Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, muli muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you'll join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Sarah French. She is here to celebrate a beautiful story, Jesus and St. Nick. Before we invite Sarah into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is sponsored by The Journey of an Acorn, the award-winning children's book written by Corey Wolf. This sweet little book has received 4 independent publishing awards. It was named by the Independent Book Publishers Professionals Group as one of the best indie books of 2020. It's a tale packed with powerful messages, such as learn to forgive so you can continue to grow. Everything you need to become great is already within you. And you can guide future generations so they can awaken the greatness inside of them. This children's tale might be a quick read, but its message of boldly forging your own way in the world and helping others along the way is timeless for readers of any age. Rich with evocative imagery, and this is a charming and well-penned fable that can be read again and again. It's The Journey of an Acorn, the award-winning children's book written by Corey Wolf. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Jack and the Crunchy Leaves, my first hearing aid. A heartwarming journey that will touch your soul and open young minds to the power of acceptance. Join Jack as he explores a world of newfound sounds and understanding through his journey with hearing aids. This captivating story doesn't just entertain, it educates children about the importance of empathy, embracing differences, and the remarkable impact of these tiny devices. Get your copy now on Amazon in paperback, ebook, and even the delightful companion coloring book. Let's embark on a learning adventure together. Jack and the Crunchy Leaves. It's a beautiful book written by Ken Hyder. Join us right now from Charlotte in the great state of North Carolina. Our guest is here today to celebrate her beautiful picture book. It's called A Beautiful Story, Jesus and St. Nick. Please welcome to the show, Sarah French. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Hey, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm super excited to be with you guys.
I am so excited to have you on. Sarah used to wake me up in the mornings. Not really, but here in Boston, she was on one of our news stations here in Boston for many years. And so it's so great to see a friendly face on my screen.
Oh, thank you. We loved living in Boston. And for a period of time, we lived in the North End. And I said, this is the greatest thing and the worst thing, because after work, I would go and get pizza and cannolis. And I was like, this cannot be good. But there was so much good food there. You just can't go wrong with any restaurant you walk into.
And that was in walking distance of Channel 7. So that was great. And back then, the rents probably weren't a bazillion dollars like they are now nowadays.
It just keeps going up everywhere.
It's crazy. It really is crazy. But what's not crazy is this story that you're telling in A Beautiful Story. Tell us about this book, please.
Sure. So A Beautiful Story, Jesus and St. Nick was an idea I had a few years ago. I was trying to find a Christmas story for my children that told the story of the birth of Jesus, but also weaved in the story, the true story of St. Nicholas, and how it's one beautiful story. And so we talk about Jesus's birth, and then we talk about how 300 years later, St. Nicholas was born, and we talk about the traditions that we have, like hanging stockings. Why do we do that? Well, St. Nicholas, he used to surprise people and toss coins through the window. Some say they would land in the stockings. Other people say that he put coins in shoes. So I love history, and I wanted my kids, I want them to know why we celebrate certain holidays, but also why we have certain traditions. And so I had this story, and I pretty much put it together on a scrapbooking website and just read it to my kids. And then a mom messaged me on social media and said, how do you do Santa as a Christian? And I said, well, Santa was a follower of Jesus. And actually, I wrote this story for my kids, and I did a little post on social media, on Instagram and TikTok. And then I started getting messages from other moms saying, oh, hey, how do I get the text for this book? And so that kind of sparked the idea, well, maybe I should turn this into a children's book. And so this book takes that story that I've told my children for the past few years, but this book brings you into my home. So my kids are the main characters, and there's kind of a lesson too about teaching kids giving and how we can all be like Santa and think of other people during the Christmas season.
You know, I know there are people out there who might be listening going, religion, horror, we don't want to, and yeah, religion isn't perfect, and there's been a whole lot of terrible things done in the name of religion, but there's so much beauty, and when you get to the heart of, I'm a Catholic, and so, Christmas is certainly part of our tradition, but when you get to the root of every religion that I've looked into, the root is love, and yes. We're called to be kind to each other, to love each other, to follow that golden rule. So I love that you're taking and reminding kids that St. Nicholas didn't come into the world to boost Target sales or Amazon sales. That, he came from a genuine place of love.
Yes, and that's who St. Nicholas was, and he was actually born into a family of great wealth, and his parents died when he was young, and he ended up using his inheritance to help other people, especially children. And so that was his message of love and giving. And that's what I want my kids to take away from the holiday season. How can we be like Santa to others? And here in North Carolina, we have Samaritan's Purse, and we fill shoeboxes every year. And I take the kids to the store. They pick out what they think a child their age would like, and we fill the shoebox, and then we can send it off, and you can track the shoebox and see where it goes. And I say, see that you're like being Santa to these other kids who might not get a Christmas present otherwise. And so that really is the message of the book. Again, it's meant to be educational too. I mean, informative for some adults. I've had adults tell me, oh, I didn't know that about St. Nicholas. And so really this time of year during the holidays, you're exactly right. The message is love and giving, thinking of other people before ourselves.
Yeah. I really love that. For many years, my beautiful wife and I led a ministry to serve homeless men and women at the Shattuck shelter that you probably covered at some point in your time here in Boston. And my kids, who are now adults, would help very often along with their friends. And it was the best part, our Christmas party for the guests there at the hospital. It was a real highlight for my kids. It was a highlight for everybody in the parish that supported that ministry. And it just proved that giving is so much, it sounds cliche, but giving is so much better than receiving.
I love that story so much. Before I worked in Boston, I worked in Hartford, Connecticut for a little while. And I met a young woman who was a reporter, and she was down in Haiti on a mission trip. And she was down there when the earthquake happened. And so I interviewed her and did a story when she returned because she decided to change careers and become a nurse and started taking these groups of nurses from New England to Haiti. And so I said, I need to go with them and do a story. And so I went into my boss's office and, they said, no, you can't do that. And my mom always said, you were always very stubborn growing up. So I don't like no for an answer, which sometimes isn't good, but sometimes can work to your advantage. And so I thought about it, and then I went back and I said, okay, what if I pay for the trip and shoot the stories? Will you air them? And they said, yeah, sure. But I ended up going with this group from New England to Haiti, and it was a medical mission trip. So there were doctors and nurses, but also a church that went. And some of the people from the church brought their kids, and we stayed at an orphanage for a week. And it was the most life-changing experience. I know Haiti, when I went, it probably was a little safer, than it is now. But to see these parents being an example for their kids of helping others and giving, and I just thought, what an example. Like, that's the kind of parent I want to be, to take my kids to the homeless shelter, to think of other people, like, during the holidays, during Thanksgiving, you can pass out Thanksgiving meals. Those are the things that we need to do. And I really think when we put other people before ourselves, in this world where everyone's trying to figure out how do I be happy? Me, I find the people that are the most generous and giving and put other people before themselves, those are some of the happiest people I've ever met.
Just as you said that, in my mind, it is very weird, but I get these flashes. And just as you said that question, everybody's asking. If you go on social media for more than 30 seconds, you're going to scroll past something that says, how can I be happy? How can I deal with my anxiety?
Yes.
Never once have I seen any of the quote unquote experts say, why don't you do something nice for somebody else?
Yes.
And that would, I think I should make that video tonight.
You should.
Because
talk about taking your kids to the homeless shelter. I mean, that is incredible. I mean, what an example. And those are the things I think when we take our sight off of ourselves and focus on others, I think that is what brings true joy.
I agree with you. I really do. We'd make terrible content for regular TV because there's no conflict here. We agree with each other. Everybody be turning off and looking for somebody fighting.
Oh, listen, my co-anchor on the morning show now, he hosts Flashpoint, which is basically our political show on Sundays. And I'm always like, don't ask me to host that because I do not like getting in arguments with people. I do not like controversy, which, in today's day and age, and I definitely have my beliefs, but you know what? I'm like, let's find common ground. Let's figure out how we can get along.
Well, that's when you start a discussion with, and that you have diametrically opposed views, and instead of going in there at the disagreement points, and you say, why don't we first figure out where we agree? And build on that. I think really quickly you kind of figure out this. We agree on like most stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so important. My grandma always said, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we talk. But it's so true. We can learn a lot from people that are different than us, and it doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but I think listening is so important and something that we are lacking in today's day and age. We need to be listening and, actively listening. Sometimes when people have conversations, when someone's talking, they're not really listening to them. They're worried about, okay, how am I going to respond to this? Or what's my comeback going to be or whatever. We need to be truly listening to what people are saying. Open our hearts, open our minds. I think that's very important.
Yeah. I had this memory of my kids driving in the van, which, again, parents, I know a lot of parents out there, they complain, I got to drive the kids, I got to drive their friends. It's the best thing in the world because you just have to be quiet up in the front of the minivan and you're just going to learn everything about what's going on at school. It's like, talk about secret spy. But I remember being in the van one day and my son and his buddies were in the back and they were all talking and not one of them was listening. All they were doing was waiting for their turn to talk. And they were talking about completely different things. I couldn't believe it. It was a riot.
That's so funny. I always tell everybody here, my second job is a chauffeur for my children. So I actually, when I started, when I came to Charlotte, I was working nights. And that shift is like 2 to midnight. And I said, I'm missing out on too much stuff with my kids. I wanted to be present. I wanted to have dinner with my family at night. I want to be able to read to my kids in bed before, because they're little now. And I know they won't always want their mom to read to them, but right now they do. And I cherish that time. So fortunately it worked out where I was able to switch to mornings. So now my alarm goes off at 2 a.m.
I was going to say, we can't let this run late because you'll be up past your bedtime.
I know. No, it's fine. But I'm done at 12:30 every day. So I am home in time to pick up the kids from school and be present for them and be that chauffeur. Mm-hmm. And I really love that because it's true. Like you were saying, the kids, they talk so much more when they're in the car. I don't know what it is, but it's something about being in the car that it just goes.
I think part of it is little eye contact. To be honest with you, it's like, oh, there's no one staring at me, and what are you thinking about? It's like, oh, we're looking off, and they just kind of get mesmerized and start talking.
Yes.
And
I did read something about like kids and men. You can have better conversations with them when you're in the car or when you're out for a walk, as opposed to like sitting down and looking at your husband and saying, let's have a discussion. I think a walk they respond better.
Are you saying I'm like your 4, 5, 6-year-old kid? That's okay. I've been.
No, listen, my husband's the same way as well. He does better if we talk in the car or on a walk.
Hey, one of the things that I love to ask anytime we have somebody in the media on, how are you going to teach your kids how they can best discern what to trust? Because your kids are getting bombarded, or they're going to be bombarded with more information than you and I put together ever thought we'd have at their age. And some of it is trustworthy. Most of it isn't. What are you going to teach your kids in terms of how best to discern what you can trust, what you can't trust, and what should you do with that information?
Well, right now, our TV station, we have a thing called Verify. And so we actually pull stuff from social media that is spreading or trends on TikTok, and we'll verify, is this true or not? Does this work? Sometimes it's hard news. It really started during COVID. But now, it can be as light as, is this picture real? Or it can be a trend that's going on TikTok, and we're like, does this work or not? So that's something we're trying to do now. But the whole thing with trusting what you see is actually very scary because we do so many stories now on AI and the future of AI and how just from your voice that you post on a social media video, you don't have to be on TV. It's like a video a 5-second clip, and they can take it, and scammers are using it to turn it into, complete sentences and phone calls and saying, oh, we have your loved one and you need to wire us this much money, or they can take a picture of you and make it animated. And people are using like Chat GPT now, and you can ask it questions, but it's not always completely reliable. So yeah, I don't know if I have the answer to that, because what is the future going to hold for my kids when they're in high school and having to write term papers? Will they even write term papers in high school anymore with AI? I don't know. But you have to, there is so much on social media and so many people out there acting as an expert that you have to go to reliable sources, that you trust. And I won't share anything on social media unless it's, obviously our station goes through a verifying process. Most TV stations, journalists do, before they will post anything. But yeah, the future of that is scary to me as a parent. I don't know what that looks like for my kids.
Yeah, when I first started asking that question a couple of years ago, it was like, how do we, we hear this term fake news, and now we're only talking 4, 5, 6 years later, and suddenly it's AI and, manipulated videos and all this other stuff. I don't know what your kid's going to be facing.
I will say, to add on to that, since you mentioned the fake news part, something that I love so much about working in local news is that we are there for you, for your community. And I working in local news, I realized the value in that when I was in Boston during the Boston Marathon bombing. People were turning to their local news stations. They were turning to your neighbors. We live in that community with you. We know the streets. We know the areas. If there's a school shooting, like, you turn on your local TV station because most likely the people on TV have kids in school with your kids. We were talking about the UNC shooting in Chapel Hill. I have parents who are texting me saying, "What do you know? Have you heard anything?" And so that's something that I think is so important when it comes to local news. Like, we are there, we are invested in your community, we're a part of it. And so I really see the value in local news, and that's why I love working for local TV stations.
And that is a message that has been shared by some other local folks, local media folks who've been on the podcast. And I think it's great. It really is good advice, because I know you can go on the cable news stations and you can look at one channel, the story, watch the story on one channel, and then change and watch the story on another channel. And you're thinking, that's the same story? I'm sorry. That's like crazy.
Yeah, and they can have, I think, depending on the show you're watching, show their opinions. And I think in local news, we're kind of staying down the middle. I feel like we are sticking with what's happening in your kid's school, what's happening in local government, what's happening in your town. And so it's really the stuff that's affecting you and your family. And that's why I feel local news is so important.
Yeah. Speaking about affecting families, what do your kids think about being the star of A Beautiful Story?
They think it's pretty cool. When I first wrote the book, I don't think it processed with them, and they're so young. They were like, "Well, where are the pictures?" And I'm like, "Well, the pictures are coming." But now that the pictures are in there, and Robert Saber did such a wonderful job with the illustrations. He's a beautiful painter. And so I think they're like, this is really cool that we're in a book.
Yeah. So cool. So cool. I guess I have to ask, where do you find time getting up at 2:00 in the morning to be the news anchor and being a mom? Where do you get the time to write kids' books?
Well, I had that part of it written already that I was reading to my children before I decided to turn it into an official children's book, I guess you could say. But while I love my job and I'm a mom, I do like having passions on the side, and this was a really fun side project for me to do. The whole process, I'm sure, as any of your listeners will know, took a lot longer than I thought. But the process of writing a book, it can be very cathartic, and then finding an illustrator and seeing that illustrator bring your story to life is so rewarding. And this was such an amazing experience for me. It's my first children's book. And now I'm like, oh, what else can I do? But it's fun. And I highly recommend if you have it in your heart, if you have a story on your heart, to pursue this journey. And even if you're just taking a little time each day, or once a week, or once every other week, you'll look back in 5 years and go, I'm really glad I did that, as opposed to just not making time at all and then looking in 5 years and going, I wish I would have just took 5 minutes a day,
Absolutely. Well, I know that folks, I think, will really enjoy a beautiful story, Jesus and St. Nick. It's, I think it's a beautiful story any time of the year. It's certainly a beautiful story to read at Christmas time during the holiday, all the different holiday celebrations. And I think most people sit down and think, yeah, Christians, of course, Christian family. I think all families can enjoy this, because I think learning about each other's faith and traditions,
yes,
it's a beautiful thing.
Yes, it's so important.
Yeah. Please, Sarah, tell everybody where they can go to find out more about A Beautiful Story and find out more about you.
Sure. So I have all the information on my website, sarahsfrench.com, to all my social media channels. And the book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of A Beautiful Story, Jesus and St. Nick, Sarah French. Sarah, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Scott Rothman. He's returning to the show to celebrate Basketball Town. You are going to love Scott. We always love having Scott on the podcast. We know you're going to love it too. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we're going to start by thanking our amazing guest, Sarah French. Please be sure to check out A Beautiful Story, Jesus and St. Nick. Also want to thank our sponsors, Jack and the Crunchy Leaves, My First Hearing Aid. Beautiful, beautiful book about acceptance by Ken Hyder. Also want to thank Corey Wolf, the author of The Journey of an Acorn, an award-winning children's book that you and your kids are absolutely going to love. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.